Keith Raniere, the disgraced self-improvement guru, will spend the rest of his life in prison for sex trafficking. The NXIVM founder was accused of sex cult and had followers that included actors and millionaires.
On October 27, 2020, Keith Raniere, who is one of the most well-known self-help activists in America, was sentenced to 120 years in prison for a crime that no one could have suspected him to have committed. Keith's arrest and sentencing opened a whole Pandora box, which included several Hollywood stars, celebrities, and multi-millionaires. And the crime? Funding and operating one of the largest sex cult of America's history that was involved in several counts of abuse, harassment, and sex trafficking, all of which happened under the disguise of a well-known self-help brand known as NXIVM. Now, the rise of NXIVM happened exactly how you would imagine it to happen in a Hollywood thriller, but its fall is even more dramatic. For now, let's start from the beginning. This is the story of how the notorious group NXIVM, led by charismatic leader Keith Raniere, managed to seduce Hollywood stars and America's most powerful elite into a barbaric sex cult. Keith Raniere, the super genius cult leader. Before moving on with the cult, let me tell you about the person behind it. Keith Allen Raniere was born on 26 August 1960 in Brooklyn. His father was an advertising executive, while his mother worked as a ballroom dancing instructor. In 1978, Keith graduated from his high school and joined Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, from where he graduated in 1982. Now, academically, Keith wasn't considered as bright as other students, and he barely passed most of his courses. However, it will come to you for a surprise that many of his peers and followers described him as some kind of ultra genius. Keith actually himself bragged many times that he has an IQ of 240 and was even recorded in Guinness Book of World Record as the smartest man alive. Now, Keith was someone who loved to read when he was growing, and his particular area of interest was psychology. At the age of just 12, he read Isaac Asimov's Second Foundation, a book whose main theme was mind control. Years later, this book would serve as an inspiration for Keith to lay down the foundation of NXIVM. Now, NXIVM was basically the brainchild of Keith and Nancy Salzman. Nancy Salzman, born in 1954, was a registered nurse and a trained hypnotist who had a relatively unknown background before she met Keith. Keith, on the other hand, was enrolled in running a pretty big pyramid scheme called Consumers Byline Incorporation, a company that offered discounts in exchange for recruitment.
A follow-up tonight on Consumers Byline. We first told you about Consumers Byline last May when the company was accused of being an illegal pyramid scheme that uses unfair sales practices to sign up new members. Tonight, consumer reporter Ursula LaPerry tells us some members of that multi-level direct marketing group now say Consumers Byline is not offering members all that it promised, and they're leaving the company. Now, efforts to reach Consumers Byline's president or legal counsel were unsuccessful today. So far, the company is facing 4 state investigations and several state lawsuits.
Soon, this multi-level marketing company came under the radar of law enforcement authorities and was eventually shut down. Now, ideally, one would stop after such an incident. But for Keith, this was just the beginning. In 1998, a few months after meeting Salzman, Keith and her founded NXIVM, a company that focused on personal development and self-help. Now, NXIVM, among many other things, offered executive success programs, a plan that's sole goal, according to Keith, was to help people experience more joy in their lives.
And when you run a personal development program, our main emphasis, our main belief is to have people experience more joy in their lives.
From the outside, all of this was a perfect setting, a way to help people who were feeling miserable in their lives. Millionaire clients. During the seminars of NXIVM, students would call Keith as the vanguard. while salesman was known as the prefect.
Well, actually, to clarify, he was only called Vanguard when he showed up very rarely at the training center within doing a form.
Now, if you dig a bit further, the term Vanguard was taken from a 1981 video game, where by destroying your enemies, you increase your power. Well, pretty ironic if you ask me. Now, ever since its beginning, Keith was running NXIVM as some sort of pyramid scheme cult. His unwavering charisma and personality was enough to attract more and more people towards this program. And by 2003, more than 3,700 people had already taken part in his Executive Success Program. These programs were quite alluring and offered a sense of community, self-improvement, and empowerment. But it weren't just ordinary people like you and me who were taking part in these programs. Soon the organization began attracting wealthy and influential individuals, and amongst these recruits were several Hollywood actors.
Well, NXIVM proposed themselves as a self-help organization, when really it was a criminal organization masking as personal growth.
And NXIVM was the umbrella company.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of little companies underneath that umbrella, and Executive Success Programs was the one that we were introduced to.
Right, ESP, which I had heard about ESP. A lot of people were doing that, and I had no idea that it started with ESP.
Over the years, many Hollywood celebrities have been linked to NXIVM, including the mother-daughter duo of Catherine and India Oxenberg, the Battlestar Galactica actress Nikki Klein, the Hawaii Five-O actor Grace Park. But the biggest recruit from the Hollywood was Allison Mack, who was one of the most prominent actresses of that time. Allison, who is best known for her role in the television series Smallville, became deeply involved with NXIVM, rising to a high-ranking position within the organization. So basically, she wasn't just a follower. She became one of the Raniere's most trusted lieutenants and was even involved in recruiting other members.
When I first came to ESP, I had on the surface something that seemed to be like the perfect life, or a pretty good life. Like superficially, materialistically, I was very successful. I had the job, I had the dog, I had the car, I had the boyfriend, I had the blah, 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 the clothes, everything that I thought I needed in order to be okay. And yet, I couldn't stand to be with my family for more than 2 hours at a time. And the idea of being honest with even my best friend was something that was so far outside the realm of possibility that I just kind of thought you always lived your life inauthentically. And when I came to ESP and I started to do the work in the Goals Lab, do the work in the classes, I started to transform in a way that I never expected. Like, I literally didn't know that you could spend time with someone and not be nervous. I literally didn't know that it was possible to have a week with your family where you didn't feel like leaving. I just thought that that wasn't really possible. I thought it happened in the movies. And now that's my life, that's my reality. I have an experience of my family that is nothing but joy, and it's astounding.
But it wasn't just Hollywood stars who fell under NXIVM's spell. One of the most important recruitment for NXIVM happened in early 2000s. So when Bronfman's sisters, Claire and Sarah, heirs to the Seagram's liquor fortune, they not only joined the Executive Success Program but also invested millions into this organization. As a result, this involvement not only provided significant financial support but also added an aura of legitimacy to NXIVM's operations, making things a whole lot easier for Keith. Up to this point, NXIVM may seem to you as a group that had its fair share of wealthy or influential members, nothing illegal, right?
What I thought I was learning was self-help and personal growth. What I was learning was the opposite. It was inhumane.
But behind the scenes, a much darker reality was taking shape. Within NXIVM, there existed a secretive subgroup known as DOS. For those of you who don't know DOS, it's an abbreviation of Dominus Obsequious Sororium, which roughly translates to Master over Slave Women. And yeah, it's just as weird as it sounds. DOS was structured as a master-slaves hierarchy, with Keith Raniere at the top as the Grandmaster, and the women of the group as his subject. Over the years, these subjects went through plenty of brutal and degrading practices, all in the name of self-improvement.
A Another former member, Sarah Edmondson, exposed an alleged secret society within NXIVM when she publicly shared this shocking image of a brand on her own pelvic region last fall. Here she is talking about it.
And I was feeling pain, and I had all these women around me, like, holding me, and it was, like, awful, and at the same time, in those moments, like, crazy intense to go through this with a bunch of women that I was, like, starting to feel close to because we're going through trauma together. Oh my God, this is crazy, and I'm also, like, pushing myself just to get through it.
One of the most shocking and brutal revelations that I found was the branding of these DOS members. So basically what was happening, women who were part of this inner circle were coerced into being branded with Raniere's initials using a cauterizing pen. This branding process was done without any sort of anesthesia, causing excruciating pain, and was intended as a permanent symbol of Raniere's control over them.
She would say that she proceeded with that branding ceremony after handing over collateral, which was damaging collateral that would have destroyed her life if it was released. It was nude photos, it was false confessions about loved ones.
Now, in addition to this, branding members of DOS were also required to provide collateral, compromising photos, videos, or information that could be used to blackmail them if they ever tried to leave or reveal the group's secrets. This collateral ensured their compliance and silence. In addition to Keith, the most important character in all these activities was none other than Alison Mack. The small villa actress played a quite crucial role in DOS, recruiting and manipulating women into joining the secret group. She convinced many that this was the path to empowerment and personal growth, further entangling them in Raniere's web. The script was simple. She would pose herself as a person who was going through a hard time in the past and tell that becoming a part of NXIVM changed her life completely. And obviously this served as a motivation for others to join them.
So when I first came into Jeunesse, I had just come out of a relationship and I was feeling very scared and lost and confused and like, oh my gosh, am I gonna be single forever? Am I ever gonna be able to have a relationship? What's wrong with me? Like, all this stuff. And very shortly into the program, I started to recognize and experience that what I was looking for wasn't about a relationship. What I was looking for was about an experience of myself in my life. And once I understand how to have that experience of myself in my life for me, I can then have the relationship I want. Or not, but I'm okay in either circumstance.
And I remember even like reaching my leg a little bit down so I could see if he was maybe aroused, and he wasn't, which in a way was kind of reassuring because it made me think, oh, maybe he is just doing this for me and my own benefit and he's not getting anything out of it sexually.
That's what made it all the more confusing. I definitely lost myself for a little while.
So NXIVM cult predominantly consisted of women, and almost all of these women had a one-on-one relation with Keith. You see, Keith posed as he understood their problems that no one from the outside world did. And as a result, these women grew closer to him. When enough of this trust was developed, Keith started to sexually abuse these women. And sometimes they were even used as sex slaves. All of these women were brainwashed into believing that they cannot take even a single step or decision of their lives without Keith's approval, if they wanted to lead a happy and fulfilled life.
It was a trap, and it was a ploy for Keith to enslave women for his own sexual desires.
When did your relationship with Keith become sexual?
The relationship took a different turn and became sexual when I was commanded to do a seduction assignment. That was the beginning of continual sexual abuse, and I didn't see it as that at the time.
The brainwashing that came with this abuse was so strong that most of the abused women didn't even notice what they were going through. And some of them even believed that Keith was in a relationship with them. The methods of psychological manipulation used by NXIVM were sophisticated and insidious. Keith and his inner circle employed tactics such as love bombing, where new recruits were overwhelmed with affection and attention, making them feel valued and special. This created a strong emotional bond that made it difficult for members to question or leave the group later on. Additionally, the teachings of NXIVM promoted a distorted worldview that would justify Keith's actions. Members were taught that their discomfort and pain were part of their growth process, a necessary step towards enlightenment and personal transformation. Well, this rationalization kept many from recognizing the abuse they were enduring. Similarly, Keith also maintained strict control over his followers. He dictated their diets, sleep schedules, their sexual relationships, and I think it's right to say their whole life. This level of control was designed to break down individual autonomy and foster complete dependency on Keith Raniere.
Well, I would say the one that I dealt the most with is a notorious cult leader by the name of Keith Raniere. I testified against him in federal court and helped to put him away in prison. He is now locked up for the rest of his life.
The very first cult allegations against Keith came in the early 2000s, when the well-known cult expert Rick Alan Ross published a report in which he called NXIVM a cult. He posted a psychiatrist's assessment of NXIVM's secret manual on his website that called the program an expensive brainwashing. However, the whole facade of the NXIVM finally began to crack when a few brave individuals from an internet cult decided to speak out.
What was that like? It was worse than childbirth. Imagine a hot laser dragged across your flesh for 30 minutes without anesthetic.
This is Sarah Edmondson, a former high-ranking member of NXIVM, who played a pivotal role in exposing the organization's darkest secrets. In 2017, she went public with her story, revealing the branding and coercion she experienced within the US. Her revelations sparked widespread media attention and an investigation by law enforcement.
I got a call from somebody who had defected, and she said, "You have to save your daughter." And I said, "Well, I want to be respectful of her choices as an adult," and I thought she'd wake up one day and come out of her own volition. And she said, "I don't think so. I think she's been in too long. Do you know what's going on?"
Well, since then, the NXIVM world has all but collapsed, thanks to Catherine.
Catherine Oxenberg was another famous personality who became a vocal critic of NXIVM after learning about her daughter, India's involvement. She was determined to rescue India. She wrote a book and participated in various media interviews to shed light on the group's abuses. In 2017, a report was published by Frank Parletto in the New York Times, where he called the DOS a secret society of women that started in 2015 within NXIVM, in which female members were branded and called slaves. Soon more survivors came forward, and the authorities finally took action.
The leader of an alleged sex cult has been arrested in Mexico. Keith Raniere is expected to face a judge in Texas today.
In 2018, Keith Raniere was arrested in Mexico and extradited to the United States. Allison Mack, along with several other high-ranking members, were also arrested. The trial of Keith Raniere in 2019 revealed the full extent of NXIVM's crimes, leading to his conviction on charges including sex trafficking, forced labor, and racketeering. As a result, Keith Raniere was sentenced to 120 years in prison.
A self-improvement guru convicted of turning followers into sex slaves has been sentenced.
CBS 2's Lisa Rosner live at Brooklyn Federal Court with the breaking news. Lisa.
Well, Maurice and Christine Raniere will serve life in prison. He's been convicted of multiple crimes, including sex trafficking and racketeering. Those convictions made last year, and today a judge sentenced him to 120 years.
The fall of NXIVM left many survivors grappling within the aftermath of their involvement. Rebuilding their lives has been a challenging process. Many former members have sought therapy and support to recover from the psychological trauma inflicted by the group.
Without a word to say and her head down, Allison Mack leaving Brooklyn Federal Court Wednesday, knowing she's heading to prison.
Allison Mack, who pleaded guilty to charges related to her involvement in DOS, expressed remorse for her actions. In her sentencing hearing, she apologized to the victims and acknowledged the harm she caused. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison. In my opinion, NXIVM's rise and fall is a cautionary incident about the dangers of charismatic leader and the allure of exclusive communities promising personal growth or a happy life. For those seduced by NXIVM, the journey began with the promise of empowerment and enlightenment, but ended in exploitation and abuse. The celebrities and elites who were drawn into Keith's charisma serve as a reminder that no one is immune to manipulation, regardless of their status or intelligence. Some people may say that with Keith serving 120 years in prison, justice has been served, but the reality is that with countless women still suffering the consequences of aftershocks created by NXIVM are still there. Do let me know your opinions about this cult in the comment section, and thanks for watching.